Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our July 2nd, 2018 Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting. We will call this meeting to order. First order of business is approval of the minutes for our last meeting, June 4th, 2018. Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Thank you. Items for discussion, action. Street resurfacing projects. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleased to give a street reconstruction and resurfacing update to you this morning. There's been a lot of progress since last month, and we're continuing to make strides and making a big impact in Oklahoma City. So this is item 3A that's on your agenda, and there's no action on this item. It is just a construction update only. So as we look at the work that we've done over the past several months, this is just that friendly reminder slide of the 16 early start projects. We have issued work orders, or there's work underway on all 16 of these. You recall this is about $18.9 million worth of work. The ones that are in green are in active construction. The ones that are in a lighter shade, those work orders are issued and pending for those contractors to complete those previous projects as they launch into these new ones. But you also recall we approved an additional list of 41. And so we're actually actively, as a staff, working on work orders for those 41. And this is that longer list. You'll see as we go to these pages, for example, like at Northeast 122nd Douglas to Post, there's a work order that's pending to be issued on that. So there really is a seamless transition. All of these projects are being worked as those contractors become available. And when we talk about availability, one of the strategies that we've had since we've begun is that when a contractor continues to work in one area of the city, instead of them demobilizing and remobilizing all their equipment across the city, we're trying to make sure that we keep contractors geographically based, and it helps us save some of those costs. They are able to actually remobilize if they need to, but we can get some efficiencies if we keep those work crews in general areas. But with this longer list of projects, there's definitely a lot of opportunities. But that's why you'll kind of see we're not necessarily going in a sequential order. We're going in an order where the geography works out, where the equipment's already located. But we'll make sure that we keep the projects pretty well spread apart in Oklahoma City, just so that we're not causing undue traffic impacts. So with this list, we've got the early starts. We have the additional projects. There's about 41 total million in authorization. Again, these projects are all expected to be underway by the end of the summer, early fall. And we'll be coming back to you here shortly to look at that next list. And so with 41, it's obviously a portion of the total funding that's available. We had 168 total million, and so we'll be making some additional recommendations to you here in the next couple of months moving forward. There are 8 projects that I've brought you today that just will show some of the different activities that are occurring on some of these different projects. So this is going to be Rockwell, Wilshire to Britain, and they're currently in the curb and gutter repair with the ADA. I think we mentioned last month some of the work isn't just the resurfacing, it's a lot of the enhancements to the ramps, the ADA ramps, the crossings as well. And this is what a lot of that looks like. You'll see that they do have to temporarily close lanes while they do sidewalks and curb ramps. On North 50th Street, again, curb and gutter, ADA, the mill and overlay, and this is what that looks like. What we find is that there's also some damages to some of the streets that doesn't make it just a simple mill and overlay. In a lot of cases where the asphalt or the concrete is not in good enough condition to be resurfaced, we do have to do a full panel replacement. And that's an example of what you're seeing here, where there just wasn't good material underneath that street. They'll actually recast that street, and it'll be brand new once it's finished. This is North 36th Street. Again, they're working on a lot of the improvements, and this is what a lot of these streets look like. You'll see these large cracks and some of the deformation that's in the pavements, but they'll address those. This is Portland, South 44th to South 29th. And again, this is what milling looks like. It actually takes off those first top few inches. You'll see that the base material is in good condition in this particular photo, so it makes that operation go a lot faster. The machine on the left is a milling machine, and they'll actually deposit all those milled materials into the back of that truck. Sometimes those materials can be recycled. There is a way to actually use them again on future projects where specifications allow for the use of recycled materials. Oklahoma City does allow that. It's not 100% recycled, though. So some of the other operations, this is what a laydown operation looks like. You'll see very different machines. There'll just be several deliveries made with the new asphalt materials. They'll go into this laydown machine, and then again, that's when the new surfacings are completed. They're able to do typically about a lane mile a day if it's good weather and it's favorable. But again, one of the challenges that we have is just making sure that we have traffic control. Obviously, worker safety is important, and some of our busier streets in Oklahoma City are a little bit more challenging than some of the less busy, but we'll make sure that it's safe for motorists and the contractor as well. This is what that looks like, just a little more up close. You can see those brand new surfaces going in. There's a material that's called tack. It's what actually is kind of the bond that occurs between the old pavement and the new pavement. And so the reason that you see in this right-hand photo where they had milled and it's no longer a lighter color, it's a darker color. There's actually a spray-on material that helps set up that new receiving material to take on the new asphalt. So as you see some of these things, you might see a sign periodically in the field that says fresh oil. It's just the signage that's been used, but it's really that tack material that's going down, which is that bonding agent. This is Reno, Portland to Meridian. And again, you can see the operations here. In a lot of the cases, you've got a lot of new driveway approaches that have to come in either due to damaged curb and gutter, or in some cases, when we're having to, again, upgrade those sidewalks that are in the area. If they have existing sidewalks, we have to make sure that they're ADA compliant. Southwest 29th, western to Shields, you'll see that the concrete work is proceeding very quickly, and this is what a lot of that new work looks like. Obviously, they have to work around a lot of the infrastructure. You've got to work around those fire hydrants. You have to work around those poles, but they have to get these upgraded. Again, it's a part of the federal requirements for ADA that when you do a resurfacing, and it's considered more than maintenance, you're required to bring these other supporting pedestrian features up to current standards. This is 29th, western to Penn. And this is what that looks like today. And obviously, there'll be a lot of work that occurs on this in just the next few weeks. Pennsylvania, 122nd to Memorial. Again, similar concrete mill overlay, traffic signal upgrades. When we talk traffic signal upgrades, one of the things that you'll see, and maybe you've not noticed in the field before, the old detection systems are called loop technologies. You'll see kind of a square loop that's cut ahead of an intersection that detects the car while it's there. And that's how it knows that there's a car and the signal needs to change. We have newer technologies, and we're using a technology that's radar-based. You're going to find in the resurface projects these new white panels. They're actually larger than I'm showing you with my hands. They're quite large. But they mount on the mast arm, and they're the new technology that doesn't require us to cut the pavement. So anytime you cut a pavement, you've introduced a source for water to get down underneath there and actually cause some damage. You seal those up, and they work pretty well. But I would just tell you that there's newer technologies that we're using as we launch into resurfacing citywide. And so as you see these new devices showing up on the traffic signal mast arms, that's exactly what you're seeing are those new detection equipments being installed. Again, additional milling and overlaying on Pennsylvania. This is that mill machine again, different contractor. And with that, we're going to continue to proceed through the summer. Again, we think it's going to be a very aggressive resurfacing program over the next several years, not just for the sales tax, but you'll actually see we have a lot of bond work in Oklahoma City going out as well. But as we mentioned when we started, they're really combined programs for the 2017. It's better streets, safer cities. You're going to continue to see those signs going up all over the city as we launch into not just these first projects, but as we bring future project lists to you in the next month or two. So with that, I can answer any questions you might have about our street construction program.
Eric, milling is less expensive than the laydown?
I would say they're one and the same. I wouldn't say you have to mill before you can lay down the new material. Okay. Some streets require less milling, so obviously if we don't have to go as deep, it's less expensive, but the deeper that you go, typically the more expensive because you're having to put more material back.
Thank you. Are there signs that indicate this work is being done by MAPS 3?
It'll say better, so the MAPS 3 work does not include any street work. But when we talk about the Better Street, Safer City initiative, either the 2017 sales tax or the 2017 bond, yes. So the large signs that say Better Street, Safer City are being placed on every project. So when I say every project, you'll actually see those on the upcoming, when we actually get ready to do trails and sidewalks and streetscapes and bike lanes, we'll be placing those on those projects as well. But right now it's just on the street resurfacing. You'll see those large signs like we presented at a previous meeting. You can see how large those were. They're 4 feet by 8 feet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Next is street enhancement projects. Aubrey?
Good morning, all. This is a little bit of a refresher of where we've been with street enhancements. We talked about our street enhancement prioritization criteria back in March and talked through some of the thinking that went behind the projects that were recommended or on the unfunded list from the GO bond as a place to start. So where we're picking up this month is, remember how we wanted to get the full scope of all the sidewalks and trails that could be funded with the sales tax so that we could do an overlap analysis of those street enhancement projects that made that unfunded list. So as this board's been working through the sidewalks and trails and confirming the criteria for prioritizing those projects, we've done that. And so what we'll share with you now, oops, I'm going backwards, is moving forward from our prioritization method summary is making a ranked project list and seeing how those fall on the city. And this map shows all of the unfunded projects that were on the prioritized list. So there are small numbers on this map that correspond to the corridors where street enhancement projects of different scopes and different levels of intensity were recommended. And you do have a copy of that list in your packet. So the list goes up through 46, 49, I think maybe over 50 projects. I'm seeing those numbers on there. However, you know that the streetscapes portion of funding that's allocated for Better Street, Safer City is $24 million. So what we've done with the overlap is we did find just one project from the original list you looked at, which was ranked out at number 12 from the original list. Sorry, let me go back. And that project was really more of a sidewalk and bike facility project. So as we talked about before, if there were any ways that we could fund projects through sidewalks and bike facilities, we wouldn't have to use the street enhancements portion of funds for that. So that project that was on the previous list has been removed, and this is where we are with our potential project list. And I also would like you all to meet one of my staff members, Kim Cooper-Hart. If you hadn't had a chance to meet Kim before, she's going to be coming to all of these meetings. Kim Cooper-Hart manages our commercial district revitalization program. And so as Kim has been working with these commercial districts, who many of whom have been asking the city for assistance for doing street enhancements projects, many of those commercial districts are within that, maybe the top 10 potential projects on our street enhancements list. So a lot of pre-thinking and pre-work has already been done with those districts to identify their needs and scoping of potential projects for street enhancements, whether or not they would need on-street parking or street furniture, those types of things. So what we're doing today is confirming the project list, and what that would release us to do is to go back out and work on getting some solid cost estimates and scopes done for the top priority projects, and we would probably start with the first 10 on the list and do some scoping and cost estimation. And then that allows us to come back to this board with recommendations for projects to move forward to receive funding. And one of the things I'd like to mention is because these projects have such different scopes, some of these projects might be limited to just a new signal and crosswalk. That might be a project that ranked number 2 on the list, but it may actually be the first one to be implemented because it would be very quick to do. Other projects, like the first one on the list, which is Paseo area, would involve a lot more design and engineering, so that project would probably involve stakeholder input and feedback and may actually not move forward as fast as some of those others. So even though this board is recommending priority projects, the sequencing of those being complete may not fall in the order that the list presents them. So if you have any questions about where we are with the street enhancements projects now, I'm happy to answer them. And the action that we're requesting on the agenda today is to go ahead and receive that project list so we can start working on cost estimates and getting projects brought back to you for recommendation for funding.
Aubrey, did you say that the streetscapes total budget is $24 million?
Right.
Thank you. So we need a motion on this.
I'll make a motion to approve the project list.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve this project list. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. And the next portion of this presentation is going to be taking our discussion about bicycle facilities forward, and I'm going to ask John Tankard to come up and lead us through that.
Good morning, everybody. Like Aubrey said, we're going to go through the bicycle facilities portion of this, and I'm going to recap our criteria and talk about what we've done since the last time we met. Okay, so the project list that we presented several months ago was based on these criteria, and these originated in Bike Walk OKC, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan that was adopted by City Council in May. And so we were looking for projects that impacted large numbers of residents, was cost efficient in doing so, and connected people to destinations, whether it's things for transportation or recreation. We wanted to make sure that barriers were overcome, whether that be interstates or water bodies or arterial streets. And then if a project was part of one of our component plans in Bike Walk OKC, that gave it points as well. So that's if a project contributed to completing the Grand Boulevard Loop or making the crosstown connections north, south, east, west, things like that. And then in the plan, we prioritized projects that already had funding, which doesn't apply here because these projects haven't been approved yet. The committee asked that geographic distribution be considered, and you may recognize this map from last month when we talked about this from the perspective of sidewalks and pedestrian infrastructure. And so this map shows a heat map of where people live, so residential density, where people work, employment density, and then where people visit, which we call activity density. So this just kind of shows where people are and where people are going to in the city. And this map shows on numerically corresponding with the list that you have in your packet, the top 13 projects, which using just very conservative cost estimation was about as far as we felt comfortable saying we could get with the funding available, $12 million. And so you can see that these are distributed around that heat map area. You can see that on the map here. And another major consideration was taking advantage of facilities that already exist. So our trail network is fantastic. It reaches all over the city. We've got new trails going in down at Lake Draper. We just had the Will Rogers Trail completed. So making sure that these bike projects connect people to these trails that we've already built and the ones that we're building right now was a high priority so that we get a consistent network that allows people to use bicycles for transportation and recreation. So with that, we've got a couple of items, the first of which is to confirm the updated project prioritization, which that's just adding in geographic distribution. So if you have any questions about the list or the presentation I just gave, I'd be happy to answer that. Otherwise, we need an action on this.
We first need a motion on the confirmed bicycle facility project prioritization criteria. Are there any questions on this?
I have one question. Is the prioritization list that we're going to look at here in a moment, is it based on this criteria?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it started there, and then we added a geographic distribution component to get projects around the city.
First, this one second.
And in subsequent meetings, we'll come back with some detailed project descriptions. So if there are things there, I mean, we haven't done the full site investigation, engineering, whatever studies that need to be done. So these alignments are a recommendation at this point.
I think as we get ready to look at the project list as well, Mr. Thompson, one of the things I think as you look at the map that was presented, I mean, consider these red lines alignments. So we have not gone into the field yet as a city staff to start the analysis of how you actually put that bike facility in there. So I think as you look at Bike Walk OKC, there's different types of facilities. So there's obviously on-street type facilities that we're really familiar with downtown, but there's other off-street or behind curb or other trail-like but bike-type facilities that we're also going to be considering. So as we start to look in a lot of the suburban areas, we will actually use consulting services when needed, but obviously going into the field and bring back to you the more detailed information about the cost and what it includes, whether it's delineated bike lanes on streets, whether it's perhaps a bike trail behind the curb, but something that's very bike-friendly for the area that it's constructed. So if there's some questions about what that looks like, we'll be bringing that back at a future meeting. We're just trying to get the alignments today so that we know what to study.
And just to remind me, I'm happy you pointed that out because I was just trying to make sure I was keeping in mind. I think the trails, the sidewalk, and the bicycle sort of scopes kind of tend to bleed together. So I think maybe we've also had some conversation about how this would interact, how the bicycle facilities might interact with some of the trail approvals and things as well. So when might we get to, I guess, more information on what kinds of facilities would actually be installed? What kind of infrastructure would be going into these different areas?
So I think if we look at this map, you'll see where there's some multi-use trails identified in green. You'll see where the proposed projects for what we're considering today are identified in red. And I think you're exactly right. You're starting to see some of those overlaps or some of those connecting points. With your consideration for recommendation today, you're giving them the guidance for the staff to go out and actually look at that in detail. See what that connection looks like. See if that looks like a trailhead. How do you transition, for example, off of the River Trail at May Avenue to get onto the May bike trail that goes south to Earlywine Park, right? So we don't have that all figured out yet. We know there's a preferred alignment there, but we'll bring that back. And so it may look like a set of plans from a consultant. It may be something more simple. So I would say kind of like the previous projects, some that are very easy, we may be able to do those in-house. Ones like May Avenue, we're most likely going to have consulting services. And I would apply that logic to any of those that you see here. We would bring that back after today. If we find that one of the alignments doesn't work, we'll bring back an alternative to you to show what we think could work. So if we find that there's something on May Avenue that potentially doesn't physically work out. Maybe it's we have to acquire right-of-way that's excessive. Maybe there's an alternate alignment to get it around a problematic area. So
we'll look at things like speed limit, amount of traffic on the street, and that'll determine what level of safety a facility is going to require for cyclists.
So your recommendation today gives us the guidance to move forward. There's not a final decision being made. There's not any funding that's being applied. So that will be information we'll bring back to you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the prioritization list. Yeah. The criteria. Yes, prioritization criteria. Confirm the criteria here.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Thank you. Passes. Next then is D3, receive prioritized project list for bicycle facilities.
So this is the list of those projects that the criteria led to, so we'd ask that you receive this list. That would require an action.
Any questions? Move to receive. Moved. Receive.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is 3E, trails. First is presentation and discussion of scope of work and cost estimates for the repair and resurfacing of the Burt Cooper trails. These are the trails that circle Lake Hefner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this has been an item that you've awaited, and I think we had been optimistic we could have this ready for you last month, but in cooperation and With our Parks Department and the Director, Doug Cupper, there's been a lot of work done to do an assessment, and so we're pleased to invite Doug to the podium to present that information today. There's actually 2 items on your agenda, so with Doug's presentation, and of course we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers, there's an item for your consideration today to approve the funding for the project if this is something that this board would like to move forward. So there's actually 2 items, so welcoming Doug.
Thank you, Eric. Doug Cupper, Director of Parks and Recreation. Wrong way. 2 months ago, I came before you with a suggestion that we might tackle some of our declining trail systems with the Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Tax Funds, and we talked specifically about the Burr Cooper, just as an example. It's one of our oldest trail systems. It's one of our heaviest used systems, and we were trying to capitalize on the work that Eric had presented to you as it relates to roadway improvements and revitalizing the roadways. We tried to follow that pattern when we were talking to you all about it a couple of months ago. We wanted to look at those trail systems that have the highest use. We wanted to look at the trail systems that have the highest age. We wanted to evaluate them based on the same PCI and analysis that we were doing before. We had estimated approximately $250,000 for those sections that were the worst of the Burr Cooper Trail at that time. In the interim period of time, we started working with Eric's staff, the street maintenance folks, the people that actually understand pavement, and what we really want to accomplish is putting the Burr Cooper Trail back into its #1 Class A condition going forward, and not just doing 3, 4, 6, or 8 of the 41 segments that we were talking about. So with their help, we did an evaluation, and the new number that we've come up with to do the whole section of the Burr Cooper Trail, and again, it's these segments that go around the southern end of Lake Hefner, the approximate cost now is at $770,000. Again, this is to completely rehabilitate all of the Burr Cooper Trail into pristine #1 conditions, just like you all have authorized the early start of those roads that were in the 2017 GO. Really, the Burr Cooper was targeted for our 2017 GO funds for trail, either new trails, trail enhancements, or revitalization of the trails. So what this really tantamounts to is an early start for our trail maintenance and revitalization that we have listed in the 2017. So again, this does the whole lower section of the Burr Cooper Trail. Obviously, the roadway along the dam is a completely different type of animal, and we'll address that probably later with other funds. But this gets the majority of what we know as the Burr Cooper Trail revitalized and in quality condition, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as it relates to this new number as it relates to the Burr Cooper. This is just pavement. This isn't signage. This isn't amenities. It isn't new benches or restrooms or any of that. This is just to get the pavement back into Class 1 conditions. Again, be happy to answer any questions.
So I had a question about that. You answered one of my questions. I was going to ask if this might include the signage that we started to discuss as well. So I guess what I would be curious about moving forward is would you see us, I guess, considering some of those other enhancements at a future date, and this just being kind of the thing we need to do right now?
That's what we're anticipating. We want to come back with you with a full package, just like John was talking about the on-street bicycle things. Aubrey has counseled all of us about, what is it that we want to accomplish with the $12 million of the trail funds. Do we want to focus 50% on new trails and 50% on old trails, 60, 40, 70, 30? We need to finish the analysis of the other 80 miles and we will have that for you next month for your consideration, and you will look at the criterion by which we are suggesting that split so that you can do a more informed and weighted decision as it relates to how to use the $12 million. It's kind of, again, this is kind of one of those early starts. It's our number one. It's the most asked for situations. Otherwise, we would hold off and have it part of the overall equation, but it's something that really needs to be accomplished, and we'd like to capitalize on the construction season for this type of work, just like you guys have authorized Eric to do on the streets, to try to capitalize on the good weather so that we can get this puppy done and in better shape going forward. But again, the second item today will be authorizing that, hopefully authorizing that funding. But again, you could ask us to put it back into the overall picture of the 80 miles that we will have done. My staff is evaluating the last 6 to 10 miles of the existing 80 miles is being done today. We'll spend the next 30 days working with Eric's folks to make sure that we have quality pricing on all of those lane miles of trail systems. So when we come back with the criterion and have you evaluate what kind of split you want to put for that $12 million, we'll bring that back to you next month. But we wanted to make sure that we have the opportunity to. I broached the subject 2 months ago. I owed you the update today on what the numbers now look like to do all of those 1,000-foot sections. And again, that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Thanks. I appreciate that answer. That's very helpful feedback. So I guess one of my thoughts, and this is maybe just a comment or feedback in general, unsolicited, but I think it would be nice, and what you're saying makes a lot of sense to get it done, because these are the upgrades that need to happen. So I'm definitely supportive of that. I would just like to, if this is kind of the crown jewel of our trail system as far as use and kind of visibility and that kind of thing, it seems like it would be a great place to show, from an optic standpoint, where we want the trail system to go. So I do think the signage and those other enhancements are an important thing maybe to follow after.
Well, and I think that's part of the next wave of discussions as it relates to the $12 million. We all know, we told you, I think, 2-3 months ago that the whole sign package in the 2017 GO bond was $3.3 million. We have it broken down per trail system. So once we establish the criteriums and you establish what percentages you think we should spend of the $12 million for new trails, and hopefully you will dictate that those new trails will have the new sign package already built into it. But then what percentage goes back to the existing trail systems, we will know based on that as we build out those criteriums, we have it priced out. So if the, and I'll pick one of the new ones because it's easy to come to mind, Will Rogers Trail, we know that we won't need to spend your tax dollars on revitalizing that because it's brand new, but the sign package may be $180,000. So you can weigh that as it relates to whether we use that $180,000 to do the Will Rogers Trail sign package or use that $180,000 towards a rehabilitation project of one of our older and worse condition trails. So again, I think it's part of that whole criterion discussion as it relates to how to split that $12 million, just like you did just now with the bicycle facilities and breaking that percentages down.
Once the Draper Trail is completed, which is projected somewhere early 2019, we'll have a little over 100 miles of trail. And what we're realizing is that maintenance is needed to maintain and make these trails safe again. And the trails at Burke Cooper around Lake Hefner are in desperate need. There are cracks and several places that are 9 inches wide and a couple of inches deep. So this certainly seems like this place to start and have immediate need from a safety standpoint. And the Trail Advisory Committee had been researching this for a number of months, and their primary recommendation was resurfacing of the Burke Cooper trails and the signage package. So, any other questions for?
And this is the breakdown of the worksheet of materials and soft costs and things along those lines. again, it'll be, the funding question is the next item on your agenda. This is just to give you the update so you know how we're breaking this down, how we're trying to work out all of these numbers going forward for y'all. Do we need an action?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think...
We don't need to vote on that. We need to vote on E. We need to vote on the second.
Right, so if we look at item E2, resolution recommending the funding for the repair and resurfacing of the Burt Cooper Trail at Lake Hefner in the amount of $770,000. We would treat this as an early start project. What that means is we would not formally, with your recommendation, amend the plan just yet, but we would take the item to the City Council to secure the funding. We would use unit price contracting for this work, similar to what we've done with the resurfacing, so it would go out immediately. It's not going to require a milling. We're really going to be adding material after we make those repairs. But what you can expect is a fully resurfaced trail for the portion that you saw highlighted in color, with all new striping on the trail, signage to come potentially later as a separate recommendation.
I make a motion, we approve the resolution.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Cupper. Next is a financial report. A is to receive revenue and expense report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we do have a good report. The sales tax received in June, and that's our last sales tax for this fiscal year, is $9.2 million. It's about 13% ahead of target, about $1 million ahead of target. Year to date, we're at $39.2 million received for that first roughly 4.5 months of sales tax has been received, $90,000 in interest earnings for a total of almost $0.3 million, and we're about $1.7 million ahead of target thus far. And so it's really good report, good news. Down on the expenditure side, there's $26.9 million has been allocated for the street resurfacing projects. About $14.8 million is under contract. Expenditures in June were a little under $30,000. Total expenditures to date are about $90,000. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. All right. Thank you.
We need to have a vote to receive.
Move to receive.
It's been moved to received. Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Next is director's reports.
So last but not least, I think what we just want to do is, Aubrey and I both wanted to kind of jointly present to you just what you can expect in the next couple of months. So where we're at is, if you summarize what we've done since we began, we now have project lists for street resurfacing, sidewalks, streetscapes, and bike lanes. And so we've had a considerable amount of progress by the advisory board to get those lists in place. We'll be bringing to you some of the cost estimates, obviously, for the project lists that were approved today, so that we can get those included in the next implementation plan amendment, which we're projecting right now to be in the August-September timeframe. But with that said, obviously with your recommendation today of the Burt Cooper Trail, it's a project that we're going to accelerate very quickly as an early start project, and so you will see that going before the City Council following your recommendation today. It ultimately will have its project worksheet also added in that August-September timeframe when we bring that next implementation plan to you. So next month is going to be another big month, and that's where we hope to wrap up the trails discussion. And so kind of as Doug was presenting, you're going to see two groups of lists. You're going to see lists for new trails. You're going to see lists for existing trails projects, and we're also going to bring to you for consideration funding percentage options so that you can see how far down each list you might be able to go with that $12 million. So very similar to what we did with streets when we were talking arterial and residential. You'll be able to make that decision next month. That information, too, will go into the implementation plan that would follow. Our work isn't done once we get that plan in place. We obviously do have some additional street projects to be bringing back to you as we work down through that list of 41. And I think some other things that you can expect this fall as we go forward, just as we've mentioned on streetscape, some of the projects that will take a little bit longer, or some of the bike lanes that have some consulting services that are going to be needed. We're looking and we'll be presenting to you an opportunity to participate in the engineering and consultant selection processes as we actually bring consultants on board to assist the program in delivering those projects. So not everything's just a funding approval and having a contractor go out. There's some design projects that are pending, and so you can expect to see later this year some of those, hopefully early design presentations and things of what streetscapes and certain bike facilities might look like coming from the board. But with that, we appreciate your time this morning. We know this takes a lot of time each month to go through these things, but it's been a lot of great information for city staff. So with that, Aubrey and I can answer any questions that you might have.
Eric, so the approval that we had today on the resurfacing of the Burt Cooper trails, the next step, that goes to the city council, and hopefully everything will go smoothly there. What would be your projection as far as the time the work would be done on?
So in anticipation, knowing that there's strong favor for this particular project from the advisory board, and I suspect that the council will most likely follow, we've actually started the conversation with one of the unit price contractors that's available to get that pricing secured and to get their crews ready. So if we were able to get that council's approval within this next month, realize that council only meets every other week, and so within the month, we would expect that we may have that approval. The contractor could start very shortly after. You would see then the construction signs go up that we mentioned with Better Street, Safer City. There's going to be some coordination on the Hefner Trail. I mean, the big thing is that it's heavily used, and so we're going to have to work out some coordination, at least some notices to some of the bicyclists, the joggers, the walkers, just to make sure they know certain sections of that trail are going to be under construction, and so we'll figure out what that looks like. But, Mr. Chairman, I suspect that we could be in construction easily by the end of the summer, and then we can deliver the time frame once we have an opportunity to see what that looks like with a contractor on how we phase it with some of the existing trail use. But it could start very soon.
Wonderful. Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, item 6, comments from our board. One of the things that we've talked about continually is improving the trails with the safety of the signage package. And we are still gaining information upon that. I think that's something that we need to keep learning and looking to. That's one of the things. We have a great trail system. Half of the citizens, I am told, use our trail system here in Oklahoma City, which is amazing. But get out there on a nice Saturday afternoon and on the trails, and you can see that. But I think one of the great needs our trail system has from simply safety is a signage package, which we have done a feasibility study on, but there's no dollars to do the construction on it. But I think we still need to look at all the information that's possible on that, and that's the great thing that we're missing on our trail system. Wayfinding signage, trail etiquette signage.
And I just wanted to let you all know that on the council agenda for tomorrow is the signage master plan. So council will receive that master plan. And once that's been received by council next month, when we bring back the complete package of trails, amenities, and potential projects, we'll be able to consider how to implement the signage and wayfinding projects, whether it's taking the entire $3.3 million bond listed plan or implementing it as projects are constructed, the way that Mr. Thompson had recommended, that we take small bites as we start to do projects. So this will be part of our discussion next month, and we'll have that ready to bring you with more detail about the signage and wayfinding.
Thank you very much. When we have constructed trails here, we have, in Oklahoma City, pretty much all the funds have gone to the construction. There hasn't been funding for signage. There hasn't been money for amenities like benches and restrooms, water fountains. So that's something that maybe we will look at in the future, is when a new trail is built, it would include in that budget monies for signage and amenities.
I mean, I think I would say, consistent with the last conversation we had about this last month, I feel like this is a good opportunity for us to sort of tackle that, and it seems like city staff is in a pretty good position to be able to help us with that. But I think this is a good opportunity to tackle that. Even one of the things that come out of this effort over the next year and a half is that we get some of those amenities in place and we can set some of those expectations moving forward.
Any other comments from our board? Yes, Jeff?
I would say just regarding trails, from our last meeting, because I'm uneducated about the trail system, so just a general comment about the trails in terms of the need for signage. I kind of investigated what we refer to as a trail in South Oklahoma City, and I think there's a lot of confusion regarding what is a trail and what is a sidewalk and how it's to be used. The one south that we have, I think it's the Early Wine Trail. It's essentially a sidewalk that leads to Early Wine Park, but there's no bikes allowed at Early Wine Park. So maybe that signage that we're considering going forward would help educate, maybe allow for that type of use to be done, because to be honest with you, I didn't realize that was a trail system that we had on, I think it's 119th, that 2-mile extension. And so I think signage and education of use and how that's to be used is going to be really important going forward, because I would assume there's a lot of people that don't realize across the city the connectivity, where they do connect, where they don't, and how to wayfind is probably a huge issue. So
I'd like to maybe comment on that, because you are absolutely right that certain trails also serve as sidewalks, but sidewalks aren't necessarily a trail. However, bicycles can be on sidewalks in certain areas if they're not signed that bicycles are prohibited on those sidewalks. So as part of our effort to just make sure that pedestrians and bicyclists both are aware, signage is going to be a really important mechanism that we use. We want to make it clear, because enforcement of those things, if somebody does get injured on a sidewalk, is impossible to do if there's not notification of what the expectation is of use of that. So one of the things that we're trying to work on citywide is a policy and procedure for making sure that we identify any sidewalks where bicycles are absolutely prohibited, and then in other areas where that is meant to be a multi-use path, make sure that the signage is indicating that. But that's a great point. I'm very glad that you brought that up.
Well, and on the east side of the Burt Cooper trails, there's an area that is a separate walking, running area, and then a cycling area. And that certainly has been discussed for future funding, is to try and follow that where there's land ability, to try and separate the walkers and runners from the cyclist, and especially along the south side, like the map that's up still on the Burt Cooper trails. There's a lot of area where that could be continued besides just the east area. But I do think, again, signage to make sure there's not confusion is key from a safety standpoint, as well as quality of life. Any other comments from our board? Thank you. Any comments from staff? All right. Comments from citizens? Good morning. Would you please state your name and address?
Terry Phelps. I live at 2216 Northwest 46th Street in Oklahoma City.
Thank you.
Yes, I've been an avid bicyclist in Oklahoma City for 30 years, and I've been so pleased with the progress that is being made on the trails. And I race bicycles. I raced national championships 16 times, so I've bicycled all over the United States, in 40 states and in Canada, and I've been in Europe. I bicycled there, so I've seen a lot of different venues for bicycling, and I'm so glad to see we're getting more and more here. You know, I teach at Oklahoma City University, and a few years ago the Secretary of Health for Oklahoma said we're always in the bottom 2 or 3 states in the country for health, and I think one of the reasons is a lot of people don't get enough exercise. So I think having these trails and these opportunities for people to get the exercise it's critical. And the issue now with the condition of the trails, the Burt Cooper trails, as they've been pointed out, there are cracks, there are places where water pools and everything, and I bicycle around Lake Hefner probably 4 or 5 times a week, and I also have rollerbladed around it, and it's a hazard. More often than not now I ride my mountain bike going around the lake as opposed to my road bike, because if you hit something on a mountain bike, it's not going to, hit a bump or something, it's not as, doesn't have as much impact, and you hopefully don't have any impact. And so I'm really glad to see these things happening, and I fully, I'm also on the Advisory Trails Committee, and we've been talking about the priorities here, and I think the Burt Cooper is a top priority. And then the signage, as has been said, is very important too. As, again, bicycling all over the country and the world, seeing signs, and a benefit from that as well that people may or may not think about is tourism, because a lot of people like to bicycle. And so, I'm glad we've got rent-a-bikes and everything in Oklahoma City and, those opportunities. So, thank you.
Any other comments from citizens? Well, then we adjourn. Thank everyone for being here. Greatly appreciate all the help from city staff on all these matters, and everyone have a very safe Independence Day. We're adjourned.